Okay. Hi, this is Athena StarSeed, and this is a series called Raising Reverence. And this is an interview with my spiritual teacher, George A. Boyd. George, welcome to Raising Reverence.
Thank you for inviting me, Athena.
Thank you for being here. Right now, we're in a time period where a lot of people are waking up from 3D consciousness to 4, 5, and dot, 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 and so on. And you have been in the spiritual, I'd say, outfield and infield for, 30 years at least?
Yeah, I've been teaching meditation since 1983. And I have, in the course of my spiritual adventures, I have mapped the entire, what we call the Continuum of Consciousness. So we've looked at each band of the superconscious mind and found out, well, where are people encountering the information that they have? And so as people move from the third dimension, which is the awareness of what's in the environment, to the fourth dimension, which is the awareness of what we call the time track, to the fifth dimension, which is the experience of eternity, where you are looking from beyond your human life, your human experience. You're looking from the standpoint of the soul. Now, the soul is natively multidimensional. So when we think about the soul living on its own plane, the soul is mirrored in its, what we call its essential vehicle. So imagine like a rocket ship. You got the payload on top, and then you've got the essential rocket that goes along with the payload. That's your essential vehicle. And then below that are all the vehicles of consciousness that you have developed on each plane of light. So the higher you go, you keep adding more stages until when you reach very, very high stages, you have literally dozens of these inner vehicles that you can tap into and gain knowledge from. So we start out with just the vehicle of our subtle realm, and then we keep adding more and more and more and more. So you have all these different stages. So you become a multidimensional being.
So is everybody born a multidimensional being, or do some people just come in and they're just in their human consciousness?
Okay, well, if you think about it, that when you're growing up, you're exposed to what your parents are telling you, what your relatives are telling you, whatever religious group you might belong to, and they're giving you this picture of the world. And many people just say, okay, well, that's the way the world is. That's what I learned from my parents. That's what I learned in my church or my mosque or my synagogue or my temple
Or my holy text.
Or wherever, or whatever, wherever I learned it. And that's the way they accept it. So they're just in this little bubble of what we call the conscious mind. So people have to have an awakening experience to move out of that conscious mind, to go through their entire paths, we call the subconscious mind, and to start tapping into the levels of the superconscious mind where they can encounter their immortal centers. We call the attentional principle or intentional witnessing consciousness, the spirit, and the soul. So once you get in touch with those three essences, then you realize that, oh yeah, I am a multidimensional being. But until that happens, you're pretty much nominally identified with, whatever you've been trained.
Right, and most people feel that they are what they do, where they were born, their nationalism, their culture. There's a lot of people that I've been talking to that say, oh, well, I'm a Latino, so I believe only this form, or I'm Catholic, so this is the only thing that I believe. And they get fixated on the dogma of their culture and their creed. How do you break out of that? Or some people are not supposed to break out of that this lifetime.
Well, the issue is that we build structures of belief into our vehicles of consciousness. Okay, so you learn something, right? You go to school and you learn something that becomes part of your knowledge, and so you construct this picture of the world. You have this belief system that you have about the world. In our intermediate course, we talk about something we call the 7 chords of Jnana Yoga. So the very first aspect that we encounter is we encounter what we call our moral indoctrination. This is where you learn the rules. You know,
Jnana yoga means wisdom, right? The path of wisdom.
well, okay, let me riff on this here. All right, so we start out by learning about what we call the conscience. That's the first thing we learn. We get that from our parents, we get it from our school teachers, we get it from, you know, whoever we're exposed to, and this is the first part of us that's educated. Second part is we educate the intellect. So that's what we learn in school, what we learn from reading in books, but it's conceptual knowledge. And then all of this combines to create what we call a world picture. And that's this third chord of Jnana Yoga. Now, it is possible to transcend that, where you start to get guidance from your soul, where you can directly meditate on the wisdom of your soul. When you talk about wisdom, you're talking about this fifth level. And then finally, you get into touch with the soul. You gain what we call discernment. And then the last stage is when you not only understand your own nature, but you understand the whole path. You understand where you're going to, what the origin is, what's the path ahead of me, where am I going? So that's the big picture, but most people get stopped at level 3 and they don't have a way to transcend it. That's where meditation comes in, where you move your attention beyond this world picture and you connect with your soul, you connect with your spirit, you connect with your witnessing intentional consciousness, or attentional principle, as we call it. And
So,
once you do that, you're able to transcend this. So you still have that structure, right? But you're above it. You know, you say, okay, well, that's where that system comes from. And there are all of these alternate other viewpoints on reality.
so is every soul in its inception tethered to the Godhead? And then we have all these layers of forgetfulness until we get to this human construct? I mean, if I keep going in and in and in and meditating, will I eventually be able to, like, do I have my own homing device that's going to take me to my true north?
Okay. Well, any person, if you follow what we call the thread of consciousness, and you move through the bands of the conscious mind, move through the bands of the subconscious mind, move through the bands of the metaconscious mind, and encounter the human self, the core of your personality, follow that thread of consciousness on up through the subtle planetary, up to the level where your soul is, cutting it, what we call the cutting edge of spirituality. If you move to that level, then you're going to encounter the soul, you're going to awaken. You know, we say people become enlightened. You know, they discover their soul. They realize, oh, there's this divine atom inside of me. There's an aspect of the divine that dwells in me. There's this universal force that's everywhere, infinite. And then on that great plateau, on that great continuum of that infinite, we find our own soul. So we're like an individualized presence of that divine life. So everyone has the potential to do that, but not everyone gets there. A lot of people, when they meditate, what happens is that they get locked at a certain stage. They go into a certain level and then they're in mind chatter. And that's as far as they can go. So the challenge is that they need to move from where they are all the way to the presence of the soul, and then they can reach that enlightened state. And there are many, many methods for doing that.
Okay, I just put you in my ear because I'm actually at work. I'm at the Mystic Journey and I'm in between readings so everybody can hear our conversation. So right now you're in my ears because I want just the people that are watching YouTube to be able to grok what we're talking about at any different level of entry point. Because as we're all experiencing this upgrade and evolution on our planet, because all of our systems are breaking down, people are now searching for spiritual solutions. And you have a very viable plan on how to get people into this continuum so that they can go back into the origins of their soul and figure out what their main, the quickest point for them to become enlightened. And let's just talk about enlightenment, because some people say that enlightenment, there are levels and levels and levels and levels of enlightenment. So when people say enlightenment, what does that mean?
Okay, well, the first two levels of enlightenment are probably the ones that are most achievable by people beginning meditation.
Okay.
Now, the first aspect of enlightenment is when people move up onto what we call the present time, the wave of consciousness that dwells on what we call the Akashic record subplane, or it's, you know, the great mind of God. You reach this level, and at that level, you start to get the download from your soul. You get it, you feel the soul's intention. You hear its thoughts, begins to teach, guide you.
Okay, hold on one second. Hello.
Hey, are you?
I am doing a live YouTube. Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. You're welcome. Bye. Okay. Sorry, I have a reading at 6. There's about like 9 people coming in, and I'm going to be doing 3 back to back. So
Okay, good.
I have about like 10 minutes before I have to go talk to somebody about the reading.
Good. Excellent. Not a problem. So where were we?
We were talking about plugging back in to the continuum.
Okay. So basically, the key is that people have to bring their attention up to the level where the soul is. So we talked about the 2 levels of enlightenment. So the first is this wave of consciousness, this wave of the now that a lot of people get in touch with, and that's where the soul's thought and intention comes into their lives. And the second octave is when you follow that ray back up into the presence of the soul. So for most people beginning the practice of meditation, that is, you know, the 2 that are readily accessible. Now, there are higher orders of enlightenment when you awaken as yet higher octaves of being. We talk about the transplanetary level of evolution, where you awaken as what we call the monad. And then there's the cosmic, in which you awaken as the astral soul, and the supercosmic, where you awaken as the supercosmic soul. Then you can awaken on one of these 8 transcendental paths, where you awaken as this transcendental ensouling entity. And when you reach the what we call the infinite consciousness on the 7th transcendental path, you encounter what we call Satchitananda. And that's the core, that's the highest state of consciousness within us, out of which all these other forms of identification arise and fall. So you imagine that one aspect is like an area that Satchitananda is, you know, learning about some aspect of the continuum. It completes its study, puts that away, opens up another one, finishes that one, puts that away, opens up another one, and so on and so forth, until all of the darkness, this unconsciousness that's inside of us, all of it is turned into light.
Okay, so speaking of light, when you say, have you seen the light, and people talk about feeling the light or being in touch with the light, or they went down a tunnel and they saw a light, talk about that. Is that a real physical light? Is that like a blinding light, or is that like a metaphor?
Okay, well, I often tease people and I say, you know, I have them close their eyes, and, you know, and then, you know, you get out your flashlight and you shine it. Are you seeing the light? No, just me. Okay, there is within every individual a living force. In some traditions, they call it the spirit. Some people call it the astral light. Some people call it the divine light. And it is a river of energy that dwells beyond the physical universe. And so once you move beyond the parameters of this physical universe in consciousness, you enter that stream of the light. And so that light gets continually brighter as you move up level by level, dimension by dimension, until you reach levels in which that light is so blinding that it's like, you know, I mean, it's like you got to put on sunglasses.
Okay, but is it an inner light? Like so I read tarot, so I'm thinking,
it's
so
an inner light.
I'm thinking of the hermit card, where he's holding the lantern that is the inner light, where that he went into the darkness and he found that aspect when you get to that card. So are you saying that, let's say like saints, that have those halos around them? Is that their inner light permeating through the cells of their body, like a glowfish?
Yeah, well, again, the light will radiate out. So there are basically three ways we encounter light. We can encounter it passively, which means that you go inside and you're traveling along this light and you're going to deeper and deeper levels until you find that state of enlightenment that's in the soul. So that's the passive method. That is what we call the active method, where you gain the capacity to do what we call an attunement, where you send out that light and you're able to send it to other people. So people who do healings, people who do emotional comforting, people who do mental healing, people who do initiation and guiding, send out that positive pole of the light. So we have both polarities inside of us, so we can train to learn both to go within and follow the passive light, but also to do attunements and do the active light as well.
So, but when you were initiated and you saw Mahajini, didn't he flood you with light and you were like blinded by the amount of light that he had coming off of his body?
Yes. Okay. So that's an example of what we call an attunement, right? So the light is coming from a source within. So that light can come from somebody who dwells in the presence of that universal being, right? So you move into the presence of the universal being, you're a saint. God says, "Oh, my child, you are a saint," and anoints you with the light, and henceforth you shall give the Holy Spirit. Okay? Or you move up into the presence of the central sun, where we call the ascended masters. And central sun says to you, "Oh, my child, you have now realized this supreme truth. I empower you through the mighty I am present." And you just, and opens you up until you give attunements from that level. And so at each different level, there are stages at which you gain the power to make attunements.
So when you were with Premrawat,
Yes.
the Maharaji, he gave the keys of knowledge. And when I heard people describing when they got the keys of knowledge, they saw this inner blinding light when he touched their point on their head.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
is
Yeah.
that?
Okay, let me explain what that is. Okay, so there is another type of perceptible light that we can experience. And this is when we talk about our spirit. We call it the heart path. The spirit is connected with the source through these little channels. They're like little tubes. Imagine these little tubes are filled with, kind of like black gooey licorice. Okay, like little tubes. And one tube is filled with light, the other one's filled with sound, and in other dimensions, there's additional channels.
Okay.
When I studied with Sadhguru Bal-Yogiswar Paramahansa, who later took the name Prem Singh Rawat, he taught the keys of opening the spirit's path for the light, for the sound, and then there are two other channels at that level of nectar, and then there's what he called the word, which is sort of like a pranic vibration. So in that particular system, you learn to open up the channels of the nada, as we call it, on all four of those channels. And then as you do that, the Satchidananda moves along with you. So that's the way that works. It's something we call nada yoga. It's something we teach in our intermediate classes, how you do that at the level it's appropriate for you to do it.
Wow. Now, I want to tell you that I'm in Los Angeles, California, and I'm in Venice right now. And there's a lot of buzz around ceremonial plant medicine. And so a lot of people are doing ayahuasca these days, and they are seeing a lot of color and a lot of energy. How much of that is translatable to a spiritual experience that you can practically apply to this active 3D walk-a-day world?
Well, one of the teachers I consider to be one of my mentors, I never actively studied with him, is a being by the name of Avatar Meher Baba. Mm. And I will paraphrase. He said that for some of you, taking a psychedelic drug, be it LSD, mescaline, peyote, magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, has given you, is basically opened this inner door, and you had a passive journey into the astral plane, and maybe you've even gone up to the state where you got a glimpse of your soul. Didn't have any control over the experience. It happened, you went there and you had these different experiences, and then you came back. You say, well, how the heck did I get there? Well, you know, do I take more of this stuff and risk, you know, damaging your brain and burning out your nervous system? And, you know, so you're just in a state where you can sit around and drool a lot.
So
well, you know, I mean, it's a catalyst, okay? For some people, it's a catalyst. It shows them, okay, these levels are inside of you. But the issue is that people become dependent on those things. What we want to do is we want to train you, okay, you got a glimpse of that. Okay, here's how you go there in full consciousness. How you can go to those same levels that you saw on ayahuasca or LSD or whatever thing you discovered, licking toads, whatever it is. All right. So you can go there in full consciousness and go to those same levels. Now, maybe because your nervous system won't be as highly unnaturally activated, I mean, it might not be as bright and as lit up as you are when you're on LSD, but you're going to exactly the same level. And if you sit there and you spend some time there, you're going to be able to see the same content that you saw on these psychedelic drugs. You wouldn't see them if this stuff wasn't already inside of you.
Okay, so then you're saying that these things are just tapping into the pharmacy that lives within your own spaceship, your spacesuit, your temple, and it's a trigger to open those dormant portals. Yet meditation can do it without burning out the nervous system, because I hear also, even with yoga teachers, too much kundalini too fast can make a person cuckoo. That they needed to go at a pace that is equal to the wisdom that their soul has gathered, so that they can apply the information. Because we have a lot of people who think they know everything, but yet they still haven't mastered their lower nature. They still get stuck on lying, cheating, stealing, jealousy, greed, like anger. And so it's like they think they have a black belt, but they haven't mastered their lower nature.
Okay, well, you've touched on a couple things here. Now, the first thing is what we call, you're talking about mastering the lower nature. Well, what happens is that as the soul grows and begins to communicate its light and its understanding of the personality, you start to mature. It sort of kind of works with you and starts to mellow you out. It's like domesticating a wild animal, right? So you got this wild thing. When I used to sit with my first teacher, sometimes he would look over at me and he would say, "That's George. He hath a wild nature." So we all have a wild nature, and so as the light comes in, it starts to dissolve all these lies you're telling yourself, all the defenses and things, and you become natural. You become yourself. You become, you don't have to put on all these airs and things, and you don't have to steal. You really get it what other people are experiencing if you steal from them. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to hurt them because you feel their pain as your own. And that's part of spiritual evolution.
It's interesting. Paramahansa Yogananda, they did a film about him. It was called Awakening. And this guy goes to him and says, "Hey, can I come up here and meditate and come to your service?" And Paramahansa Yogananda said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, but down there at the bottom of the hill, I have sex with a bunch of women and I drink and I cuss. And you're still telling me I can come up here and I can still do all this with you?" And he said, "Yes, of course. But I can't guarantee that eventually that won't fall away, that you won't want to do that anymore if you keep coming up here, because eventually it'll let go of you."
Yes. Well, because you're purifying what we call the causal body, all of the karma that you store, all these impressions, you start to melt them away, and eventually you melt away everything but this core residue that keeps you here in the world. Now, this has been referred to as prarabdha karma, or we call it pralabdha karma, or destiny karma, or fate. These are some impressions that are embedded in your genes and your life matrix that continue to operate, that enable you to keep this body. Once that's done, once you finish your destiny karma, bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Well, listen,
Okay.
we're gonna have to wrap up on that, but we are gonna finish up on this, and we will do more because I have some readings I have to go to. However, George, I adore you. I love you, and I want to just thank you on behalf of all of humanity for doing such incredible work on all the different planes and coming back with some of these intelligent roadmaps to help guide souls. So, how can we get a hold of you? What's your website?
Okay, well, it is www.mudraashram.com. MUDRASHRAM.com. MUDRASHRAM. Mudra Ashram.
So, I'm glad you sang that because I believe singing is a vibration above speaking, and that singing is the solution to everything. It certainly opens up your heartstrings and raises your vibe. So I want to thank you very much. I'm going to, this will be my first actually interview that I'm going to put on the Raising Reverence show that is side by side we're on Zoom right now, so I'm very excited. So once I figure this out, I will send you a copy. I'll put your links at the bottom, and anybody who's interested in training or going to a light sitting with George, please get a hold of him at mudraashram.com. Blessings and light. Namaste. Thank you so much.